The Empire of Lightning: How Siemens Electrified Hitler's War Machine. You are on War Profits, where we uncover the darkest and most profitable stories of World War II corporations. Today, we're diving into a tale that will make you question every light switch you've ever touched. Picture this: Berlin, 1945. The Reich is crumbling. Soviet artillery pounds the city into rubble. And in a reinforced bunker beneath Siemensstadt, the sprawling industrial complex that once employed over 100,000 workers, engineers are frantically destroying documents. Not battle plans, not military secrets, financial records, contracts, names, lists of names that could never see daylight. Because Siemens didn't just power Nazi Germany.
It didn't just supply the Wehrmacht with communications equipment or build the electrical infrastructure that kept concentration camps running 24 hours a day. No, Siemens was the invisible hand that made the entire machinery of genocide possible. And when the war ended, when the ashes settled and the trials began, this corporate giant would perform the most impressive disappearing act in industrial history. But let's rewind, because to understand how a company founded on innovation and progress became complicit in humanity's darkest chapter, we need to go back to where it all began. Back to a time when electricity itself was still a hopeful miracle. The year is 1847. Werner von Siemens, a Prussian military officer turned inventor, sits in a cramped Berlin workshop tinkering with copper wire and magnets. He's 31 years old, ambitious, and convinced that electricity will transform the world. His brother Wilhelm believes in him enough to invest their modest savings. Together, they establish Telegrafenbauanstalt von Siemens and Halske, a mouthful of a name for what would become one of the most powerful corporations in history. Their first breakthrough comes excited. Werner develops an improved telegraph system, more reliable than anything on the market. Within months, they're laying telegraph lines across Prussia. Within years, across Europe. By the 1860s, Siemens cables stretch from London to Calcutta, connecting empires, transmitting messages that shape wars and treaties and the flow of capital itself. But Werner von Siemens isn't just an inventor. He's a visionary who understands something fundamental about the coming century. Whoever controls communication controls power. And whoever controls electricity controls the future. The company expands with ruthless efficiency. Electric streetcars in Berlin, power plants in Moscow, the first electric elevator, the first electric railway. By 1900, Siemens is no longer just a German company. It's a global empire with subsidiaries spanning 4 continents. When Werner dies in 1892, he leaves behind more than patents and factories. He leaves behind a corporate philosophy: innovation at any cost, expansion without limits, and an almost religious belief in technological progress as the answer to all human problems. His successors inherit this gospel. They also inherit something else: a Germany humiliated by World War I, crushed by reparations, its economy in freefall, its currency worthless. The Weimar Republic staggers through the 1920s like a wounded animal. Hyperinflation devours savings. Unemployment soars. And in the boardrooms of Siemens, executives watch nervously as their markets collapse and their profits evaporate.
Then comes 1933, and everything changes. When Adolf Hitler becomes chancellor, German industrialists face a choice. Some resist, some flee, but most, including the leadership of Siemens, see opportunity. The Nazis promise rearmament, massive infrastructure projects, a revitalized economy built on military might. For a company that manufactures electrical equipment, communication systems, and industrial machinery, this isn't just good news, it's a gold mine. Carl Friedrich von Siemens, Werner's nephew and the company's chairman, doesn't waste time. Within months of Hitler's rise, Siemens begins courting Nazi officials. Not openly, the company maintains a veneer of political neutrality, but through backroom deals, strategic donations, and carefully cultivated relationships with key figures in the regime. The payoff is immediate. In 1934, Siemens secures contracts to electrify the Autobahn network, Hitler's pet project, a system of highways designed to move troops and tanks across Germany at unprecedented speed. The company installs lighting, communication systems, power stations. Every mile of concrete, every bridge and tunnel runs on Siemens technology. But that's just the beginning. As Hitler ramps up rearmament in defiance of the Versailles Treaty, Siemens becomes indispensable. The Wehrmacht needs field telephones, radio equipment, encrypted communication devices. The Luftwaffe needs electrical systems for aircraft production. The Kriegsmarine needs submarine batteries and naval communications. Siemens provides it all. By 1936, the company's happy profits have tripled. Factories operate around the clock. New facilities spring up across the Reich. And in the boardroom, executives happy congratulate themselves on their foresight. They're not Nazis, they tell themselves. They're businessmen, pragmatists. They're simply adapting to political reality, ensuring the company's survival in turbulent times. This is the disgusted lie they will repeat for decades. The comfortable fiction that allows them to sleep at night. But the truth that will emerge only after millions are dead, is far more damning. Because Siemens didn't just profit from Nazi Germany, it helped build the infrastructure of extermination. If this corporate complicity disturbs you, hit like to support our dives into historical archives, and comment, what would you do if your livelihood depended on a regime you knew was evil? Because that's the question thousands of Siemens employees faced, and most chose survival over resistance. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1939. Germany aggressively invades Poland. Within weeks, the Wehrmacht occupies Warsaw, Krakow, Lodz, and right behind the soldiers come the engineers, Siemens engineers. Their job? Install electrical systems in the newly established ghettos. Lighting for the walls, power for the fearful guard towers, communication lines connecting SS headquarters to the camps being constructed in the countryside. At first, these are just sarcastic contracts, paperwork, numbers on a ledger. But as the war expands and the final solution accelerates, Siemens becomes deeply, inextricably embedded in the machinery of genocide. The company builds electrical systems for Auschwitz-Birkenau, Ravensbrück, Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald. They install the lighting that illuminates the selection ramps where Dr. Mengele decides who lives and who dies. They provide the power that runs the crematoria, The ventilation systems that clear the fearful gas chambers of Zyklon B fumes so the Sonderkommandos can drag out the bodies and prepare for the next batch. And they do it all with German efficiency, with technical precision, with the same meticulous attention to detail that made Siemens a global leader in innovation. But here's where the story gets even darker. Because as the war drags on and German manpower dwindles, Siemens faces a problem: labor shortages. The solution provided by the Nazi regime is as simple as it is monstrous: forced labor, prisoners, slaves. By 1942, Siemens operates factories inside concentration camps. At Ravensbrück, female prisoners assemble electrical components for V-2 rockets, the wonder weapons Hitler believes will turn the tide of the war. They work 12-hour shifts in freezing barracks, their fingers bleeding from handling sharp metal, their bodies wasting away on starvation rations. Those who collapse are replaced. Those who resist are shot. At Auschwitz, Siemens establishes a factory producing electrical switches and fuses. Jewish prisoners, selected for their technical skills, are worked to death, manufacturing the very equipment that powers the camp's killing apparatus. The sarcastic irony is lost on no one, except, perhaps, the Siemens executives who approve the contracts and collect the profits. By 1944, Siemens employs over 50,000 forced laborers across its facilities: concentration camp inmates, prisoners of war, civilians deported from occupied territories. The company pays the SS a daily fee for each worker, 4 Reichsmarks for skilled labor, less for unskilled. It's sarcastic cheaper than hiring Germans, more profitable. And if a worker dies, there's always another to take their place. Rudolf Bingel, a mid-level Siemens manager overseeing operations at Ravensbrück, will later testify that he witnessed guards beating prisoners who failed to meet production quotas. He will claim he protested. He will insist he had no choice. But the records show he signed off on requests for more laborers, knowing full well where they came from and what conditions they endured. And he's not alone. Hundreds of Siemens managers, engineers, and executives are complicit. They tour the camps, they inspect the factories, they see the skeletal figures in striped uniforms, the brutality of the guards, the corpses stacked like cordwood. And they say nothing. They do nothing. Because to speak up would be to jeopardize their careers, their livelihoods, perhaps their lives. But mostly, it would be to jeopardize profits. And profit, in the end, is what matters most. On War Profits, we tell the real story without filters. And the real story of Siemens is a story of choices. Thousands of small choices made by ordinary people that added up to complicity in mass murder. Let me introduce you to some of those people. Not the executives in Berlin, safely insulated by layers of bureaucracy and plausible deniability from the consequences of their decisions, but the engineers and managers on the ground, the ones who couldn't pretend they didn't know. Hans Berger, a Siemens electrical engineer, is assigned to Auschwitz in 1943. His job? Maintain the power systems that keep the camp running. He's a family man, a churchgoer, someone who, in another time and place, might have lived an unremarkable, decent life. But here,
In the shadow of the crematoria, he becomes something else. He becomes complicit. Berger will later claim he never entered the gas chambers, never witnessed a selection, never saw the smoke rising from the chimneys. But he knew. Everyone knew. The smell alone, the sickly sweet stench of burning flesh, permeated everything within miles of the camp. And yet, Berger did his job. He fixed the wiring, maintained the generators, ensured the lights stayed on. Because that's what engineers do. They solve problems. They keep systems running. Or consider Maria Schneider, a secretary at Siemens headquarters in Berlin. Her job is mundane: typing contracts, filing reports, managing correspondence between the company and the serious SS. She processes invoices for forced labor, requisition forms for camp factories, payment schedules for the rental of prisoners. She knows what the numbers mean. She knows where the workers come from. But she tells herself it's not her responsibility. She's just doing her job. Following orders. This is the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt would later describe at the Eichmann trial. Not monsters, not sadists, just ordinary people doing ordinary jobs in service of an extraordinary evil. And at the top of the pyramid, insulated by layers of bureaucracy and plausible deniability, sit the executives. Carl Friedrich von Siemens dies in 1941 before the worst of the atrocities, but his successors, Hermann von Siemens, Rudolf von Siemens, continue the policies he established. They expand the use of forced labor. They deepen the company's ties to the SS. They approve contracts for camp electrification, knowing full well what those camps are for. In 1943, as the tide of war turns against Germany, Siemens executives begin to worry. Not about the moral implications of their actions. There's no evidence they ever seriously grappled with that. But about the future. What happens if Germany loses? What happens when the Allies discover the extent of corporate collaboration with the Nazi regime? The answer? They start covering their tracks. Documents are destroyed. Contracts are reclassified. Forced laborers are reclassified as voluntary workers in official records. And when the camps are liberated and the survivors begin to tell their stories, Siemens lawyers are ready with a defense. The company had no choice. It was coerced by the Nazi regime. It was simply trying to survive. It's an absolute lie, but it's a lie that will largely succeed. April 1945. The war is over. Germany is in ruins, and in the rubble of Siemensstadt, Allied investigators begin sifting through what remains of the company's records. What they find is damning. Contracts with the SS, invoices for forced labor, blueprints for camp electrical systems. Evidence of complicity on a massive scale. But here's the thing about corporate accountability in the aftermath of World War II. It's complicated. The Allies need to rebuild Germany. They need a functioning economy, a stable industrial base. And Siemens, despite its collaboration with the Nazis, is too important to dismantle. Its factories, its expertise, its global network, all of it is essential to the reconstruction effort. So, a deal is struck. At the Nuremberg trials, a handful of Siemens executives are called to testify. They express regret. They claim ignorance. They insist they were victims of circumstance, forced to comply with a totalitarian regime. And for the most part, they
get away with it. Only a few mid-level managers are prosecuted. Rudolf Bingel, the manager at Ravensbrück, receives a minor sentence, a few years in prison, later reduced. Most of the top executives face no consequences at all. Hermann von Siemens, who oversaw the company's operations during the height of the Holocaust, is never charged. He, disgusted, retires comfortably, his reputation intact, his fortune secure. The survivors, meanwhile, receive nothing. For decades, Siemens denies any responsibility for the suffering of forced laborers. The company argues that it was following German law at the time, that it had no control over the treatment of workers, that it was merely a cog in the Nazi war machine, not a willing participant. It's not until the 1990s, under pressure from survivor advocacy groups and the threat of lawsuits in the United States, that Siemens finally acknowledges its role. In 1999, the company agrees to contribute to a compensation fund for former forced laborers. The amount? 20 million Deutsche Marks, roughly $10 million. A pittance compared to the billions Siemens earned during the war, adjusted for inflation. An absolute rounding error in the company's annual budget. Each survivor receives, on average, about $2,500 for years of slavery, for watching friends and family worked to death, for living with the trauma of what they endured. It's an insult, but it's all they'll ever get. Where are you watching from? Share this with someone whose secrets needs to know these secrets, because the story of Siemens isn't just history. It's a serious warning about the present. Today, Siemens is one of the largest and respected corporations in the world. It employs over 300,000 people. It generates annual revenues exceeding 60 billion euros. It's a leader in automation, digitalization, sustainable energy. The company's slogan is "Ingenuity for Life." And on its website, buried in a section on corporate history, there's a brief acknowledgement of its role in World War II. A few paragraphs expressing regret, noting the company's contribution to the compensation fund, affirming its commitment to human rights. It's carefully worded, legally vetted, designed to acknowledge just enough to avoid controversy while minimizing culpability. What it doesn't mention is the scale of the complicity, the 50,000 forced laborers, the factories inside concentration camps, the electrical systems that powered the machinery of genocide, the executives who knew and did nothing, the profits that were never returned. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Siemens never really paid for its crimes. It never faced the kind of reckoning that might have forced a fundamental transformation. Instead, it rebranded, it moved on, it became a disgusted symbol of German engineering excellence, of innovation, of progress. And in doing so, it performed the ultimate corporate magic trick. It made its past disappear. But the past doesn't disappear. It lingers. In the memories of survivors, dwindling now as the last of them pass away. In the archives, where researchers continue to uncover new evidence of corporate complicity. In the serious questions we should be asking, but often don't. How does a company go from manufacturing telegraph equipment to enabling genocide? At what point does pragmatism become collaboration? When does the pursuit of profit cross the line into moral bankruptcy?
These aren't just historical questions, they're urgent, contemporary questions. Because the dynamics that enabled Siemens' complicity, the prioritization of profit over ethics, the willingness to collaborate with authoritarian regimes, the compartmentalization that allows individuals to do terrible things while telling themselves they're just doing their jobs, those dynamics are still with us. Today, corporations operate in countries with horrific human rights records. They use disgusted supply chains built on exploitation. They lobby against regulations designed to protect workers and the environment. And when confronted, they offer the same defenses Siemens offered after the war. We're just following local laws. We have no control over our partner's behavior. We're doing the best we can in difficult circumstances. It's the angry playbook, the same moral evasion, the same refusal to accept responsibility. Let me leave you with this. In 2005, a group of survivors returned to Ravensbrück for a memorial ceremony. Among them was a woman named Ruth Elias, who had been forced to work in the Siemens factory there as a teenager. She was in her 80s now, frail but determined. And when asked what she wanted people to remember about her experience, she said something that has stayed with me. They treated us like machines, like parts in their factories. When we broke down, they replaced us. And when the war ended, they forgot us. But we were not machines. We were human beings, and we will not be forgotten. Ruth Elias died in 2008. Most of the survivors are gone now, but their testimony remains, and it demands something from us. Not just remembrance, but accountability. Not just acknowledgement, but action. Because the war ended, but the profit never stopped. Siemens is still here, still thriving, still benefiting from the infrastructure and capital it built on the backs of slaves. And until we confront that legacy, until we demand that corporations face real consequences for their complicity in atrocity, we risk repeating the same mistakes. So, the next time you flip a light switch, or ride an elevator, or see the Siemens logo on a piece of equipment, remember, that company didn't just power the modern world. It powered the Holocaust. And it got away with it. That's the story they don't want you to know. That's the truth buried in the archives, hidden behind decades of corporate rebranding and public relations. But now you know. And knowledge, as they say, is power. The question is, what will you do with it? If this story made you think, if it disturbed you, if it made you question the corporations we trust and the systems we live in, hit that subscribe button. Because on War Profits, we're just getting started. There are dozens more stories like this, dozens more companies that profited from genocide, that built empires on suffering, that escaped justice and continue to thrive today. And we're going to tell every single one. Comment below. Do you think corporations should be held accountable for crimes committed decades ago? Should Siemens have been forced to pay more? Should its executives have faced harsher punishment? Let's talk about it, because these aren't easy questions, and they don't have easy answers. But they're questions we need to ask before it's too late, before the last survivors are gone and the memory fades and the past becomes just another chapter in a history book
sanitized and safe, and utterly divorced from the horror of what actually happened. The Empire of Lightning. That's what Siemens built. An empire powered by innovation, ambition, and the suffering of thousands. An empire that electrified the Reich and lit the way to Auschwitz. And it's angry, still standing, still shining, still pretending the darkness never existed. But we remember, and we will not let them forget. This is War Prophets, and the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, will always find the light.